This is the clue we need to unravel the mystery of the Sith.
Star Wars is a franchise that is based on a combination of different legends and myths, both from the modern day and much older myths. Dune, for example, was a contemporary book at the time that draws some parallels to Star Wars, such as the hero's journey as the main preface for world building. The legend of King Arthur, the Excalibur, and the Sword and the Stone myth is pretty well recognized as part of the Star Wars mythos. Also, there are some other myths buried in Star Wars that are not as well recognized, such as Faust, the Golem, and the legend of the Iron Knight. Both Faust and the Golem were made into silent films in 1920s Germany. These early films have influenced how these older myths were interpreted in the 20th century. Like many movies during the silent film era in Germany, these films dealt with occult magic and witchcraft of some kind. For example, Der Golem, made in 1920, featured a magic circle where the powers of darkness are compelled to give a secret word in order to activate a golem that a rabbi had created from mud from the banks of the Vltava River in the city of Prague. This rabbi, who was known as Rabbi Low, was waving an inverted pentagram and chanted spells with his assistant, which summoned a bald-headed demon. This demon gave the rabbi the word that he needed to activate the golem. Another example is in Faust from 1926. A magic circle is drawn, and spells are chanted from an old book on occult magic in order to summon a demon. In both films, a little bald-headed man appears. In Der Golem, it's not specified who this demon is, but in Faust, his name is Mephisto. With the character known as Mephisto or Mephistopheles, he is summoned by a scientist and professor named Dr. Faust. Faust is then presented with a contract by Mephisto to sign over his soul to the devil in exchange for unlimited worldly knowledge and unlimited material pleasures. Faust gladly signs over his soul after given a one-day trial. The bald-headed man that appears in Der Golem also offers information which leads me to think that this is the same or similar demon. In the 1926 version of Faust, Mephisto causes a plague on Earth by blocking out the sun with his left wing. This then unleashes a wave of fog that causes a disease in the village below. It was during the onslaught of this disease that caused Dr. Faust to lose faith in God and thus called upon Mephisto in his moment of weakness. This disease that was spread happened while a carnival was going on and could represent the weakening of society through complacency and distractions, making it vulnerable. The bread and circus is offered as a distraction to cover up the underlying rot of modern society. Mephisto looms over the city with his wing blocking out the sun, indicating the pervasive and corrupting influence he has. There are a great amount of parallels between this demon and Yoda from the Star Wars franchise. So who is Yoda? There are some interesting and strange qualities to Yoda's character. His race is not named in the films, and his origin is unclear. I came across a couple of images that seem to give some insight as to where the inspiration for his character might have originated. Firstly, a Yoda-like figure appears in a 14th century manuscript known as the Smithfield Decretals that are collections of papal letters that compiled decisions on church law and doctrine. The image was brought to light by Gillian Harrison, curator of pre-1600 historical manuscripts at the British Library. It is an illustration to the biblical story of Samson, which is an unnamed character that appears to be a demon of some kind. These images, more commonly known as marginalia and sometimes called grotesques, are often strange hybrid man-beast figures or animals dressed and acting as people, usually in a playful or vulgar manner. Often there is no direct link to the text appearing above them. Scholars have long debated the function and meaning of these images, and there is no single answer to what their original purpose may have been. These images often depict absurd things, turning the natural order of things on its head in a play between the sacred and the profane. Secondly, and more importantly, there is an image that appears in Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, 1978, Philosophical Research Society, Revised Edition. The text reads, Mephistopheles, the most notorious of the spirits of evil, is closely identified with the exploits of Dr. Faust. Goethe defines Mephistopheles as part of the power that still works for good while ever scheming ill. The majestic figure of the Arch-Templar familiar to the opera-goers is not the Mephistopheles of the grimoires. The secret archives of magic contain the names and depictions of all elemental demons and the methods by which they can be controlled. Of Mephistopheles it is written, He is under the power of Jupiter, and his regent's name is Zachiel, one of the throne angels of the Holy Jehovah. He can be made to appear on Wednesday mornings, Jupiter's day and hour, or late the same evening. He appears first as a fiery bear, but the lesser and more pleasing manifestation is a little bald-headed man in a black cape. So to explore the similarities between Yoda and Mephisto, firstly, Mephisto does not search for men to corrupt, but comes to serve those who actively seek out his services and collects the souls of those who have compromised and ultimately corrupted themselves. By summoning Mephisto and signing the contract to gain unlimited knowledge and material pleasures, they knew that their souls were eventually going to be carried off to hell. Yoda conveys secret occult and esoteric knowledge of the secret society of the school of mysteries known as the Jedi. However, he will only do this for the initiated, those who adhere to the view that there is a universal force, which can be used for good or evil. The force in the real world is called the ether or qi in Chinese. Mephistopheles in German folklore is known as a demon who walks with a limp. This metaphor is an indication of injury of the fall from heaven after being rejected by God for being a demon. Yoda also walks with a limp using a cane. In the 1926 version of Faust, there is a part during the summoning of Mephisto where it appears like a comet had crashed into Earth, and inside was the demon after being rejected from heaven. In The Empire Strikes Back, it sort of inverts this by having Luke Skywalker crash into Yoda's planet known as Dagobah. The setting of Dagobah is a foggy swamp-like environment. You can't see any leaves on the trees, and oftentimes these sorts of environments are associated with things like witchcraft because of its association with death and necrotic energy. Things like Macbeth come to mind when picturing the environment on Dagobah. The field where Mephisto is summoned in the Faust film has some similar qualities as well. If you examine the image in Secret Teachings of All Ages, there is a statue of the Baphomet figure on the upper left-hand side of the room. In comparison, if you take the image of the sigil of Baphomet, which is an inverted pentagram with an image of a goat's head in the center, and invert this symbol, it bears a striking resemblance to Yoda. The Baphomet figure is associated with Satan and the devil. Dr. Faust is standing in a circle performing a black magic ritual. The figure that appears before him is Mephistopheles. Once again, notice the striking resemblance to Yoda. When Anakin is presented in front of the Council of 12, he is standing in a circle with Yoda in front of him, much like the drawing in the Manly P. Hall book. The play Faust is often presented through the medium of puppet theater. Yoda is also presented to the audience in the form of a puppet. Yoda speaks in a backwards manner, which also is an indication of inversion and demonic energy. Mephistopheles also likes to indulge in horseplay and is addicted to practical joking in a friendly and familiar way. Yoda also possesses this quality when he meets Luke in The Empire Strikes Back. Mephisto was able to seduce Dr. Faust into selling away his soul by sweeping him away on a magical journey that was filled with material pleasures and decadence. This was all part of a one-day trial period in order to overwhelm his senses, much like the carnival environment. This is similar to how Star Wars seduces the viewer into wanting to fight for the rebellion or become a Jedi Master. Yoda teaches Luke many occult techniques, but the viewer is only given a vague idea of what it actually means to be a Jedi. Obi-Wan and Yoda basically teach Luke how to be a diviner, enchanter, charmer, consulter with familiar spirits, wizard, and necromancer. Enchantment or charming is hypnosis, mesmerism, bewitchment, and mind control, which is similar to the Jedi mind trick. ESP with clairvoyance and telepathy happens when Obi-Wan gives Luke lightsaber training with a blast shield covering his eyes. This also happens when Luke communicates with his sister Leia on Cloud City. Yoda teaches fortune-telling and psychic powers by telling Luke that he will see many things using the Force.
Through the Force, things you will see, other places, the future, the past, old friends long gone. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
Yoda also teaches Luke telekinesis and levitation by lifting boulders, his equipment, and his ship. There are also scenes that involve spiritualism and mediumship with apparitions such as Obi-Wan appearing as a Force ghost. This is necromancy and consulting with familiar spirits.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort. Sorcerers, clairvoyance.
The idea of Yoda being a demon is not the only character from Star Wars that is suspected of being nefarious in some way. The character Jar Jar Binks has long been suspected of being a Sith Lord of some kind. I don't want to get too bogged down with the idea of Jar Jar being dark side or Sith, because this has been fairly well covered by other people, but there's a lot of good evidence to point in that direction based on his behavior. He does Jedi mind tricks on Padme and her servant and gets himself placed in positions of power, all while playing a clumsy and familiar character. These clumsy and familiar qualities are really just an act, as he is actually an agent of the dark side. He also has Sith eyes. In the prequel trilogy, Yoda is much more serious than his appearance in The Empire Strikes Back, which reveals that Yoda is also capable of doing the clumsy familiar act. The artist that designed Jar Jar normally designs dragons, demons, monsters, and other dark imagery. Both Jar Jar and Yoda look as though they could be demons. They are both played by puppets. Jar Jar was always a CGI puppet, while Yoda transformed into a CGI puppet. They both made crucial decisions that led to the failure of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire. For example, Jar Jar gives Palpatine emergency powers in Revenge of the Sith. For Yoda, he being the head of the Jedi Council, had structured the Order in a way that ultimately weakened the organization as a whole. In the Clone Wars television show, there is a scene that shows that Yoda decided to cover up the origin of the clone armies, which ended up wiping out most of the Jedi.
Cover up this discovery. We must. No one, not even the Chancellor, may know. Lost a planet, Master Obi-Wan has. How embarrassing. How embarrassing. The data must have been erased.
But Master Yoda, who could empty information from the archives? That's impossible, isn't it?
Dangerous and disturbing this puzzle is. Only a Jedi could have erased those files. But who and why? Harder to answer. Meditate on this. I will.
In the mystery traditions, Venus is the morning star and the first star seen in the sky at night, as well as the last star that can be seen before dawn breaks. As the evening star, Venus, Lucifer, brings about death and necrotic energy. As the morning star, it initiates new life. It is the lesser light that brings about the greater light. The Jedi, being on the light side of the Force, believe that they are like the sun, bringing in the new age because they are the most enlightened ones in the galaxy by achieving a singularity with the Force. This is order out of chaos, so to speak, and order is achieved by balancing the Force. What the Jedi and Sith ultimately want to do is achieve immortality by using the Force to become living gods. In order to do this, they must achieve the power of Creator, to intelligently manipulate matter. When they do this, they are reborn. The sun rises every morning to defeat the darkness, death and rebirth, and this completes the cycle. Initiates of the School of Mysteries of the Jedi and Sith use the Force to become shepherds of the galaxy. They believe that the Force is everything that is nature, and through the Force they can control everything that is living in the galaxy. In the prequel trilogy, there are several instances of what appears to be magical invocation in the Jedi Council Room. The imagery of light and dark is present with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn in Episode 1. There are 3 scenes in the Council Room in Episode 1. The first is when they tell the Council about Anakin. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is in a lighter color robe, is slightly more towards the outside of the circle, crossing the plane of the outside rim. Qui-Gon Jinn is in the center. Qui-Gon is also taller than Obi-Wan. In one shot, Obi-Wan steps outside of the circle, and Qui-Gon Jinn is left alone in the circle. Then, in the second scene, when they present Anakin in front of the council, it appears to be at night or very late evening. At one point, Qui-Gon Jinn says that he is the chosen one and grasps a hold of young Anakin's shoulders rather firmly when he tells the council that he will train him.
He is the chosen one.
In the third scene, when Anakin is tested in front of the council alone, he is in the center of the circle, and it appears that the sun is setting or in late evening. Remember what it said in Secret Teachings of All Ages of Mephistopheles. He can be made to appear early on Wednesday mornings, Jupiter's day and hour, or late that same evening. In Episode 2, this same imagery is present with teenage Anakin instead of Qui-Gon Jinn in the black robe. Obi-Wan is still in the same position, wearing the lighter brown-colored robe and crossing the outer plane of the circle. Anakin is also taller than Obi-Wan. In Episode 3, Anakin is elected to the council but denied the title of Master. He once again is in the center alone. He raises his right hand in anger over the decision not to grant him the title of Master. This right hand is artificial after it was cut off in the battle with Count Dooku. As I've mentioned in the past, the right mechanical hand is symbolic of a soul divided against itself.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
This imagery appears to be like a magic spell is being cast on Anakin. There is the raising of duality with the light and dark symbolism. With Obi-Wan being on the edge of the circle and then stepping completely out of it, it is like the sun is setting or light is diminishing. It is right when the sun is setting at its lowest level that Mephistopheles can be summoned. Perhaps this is why Obi-Wan's foot crosses the outer plane of the circle in order to represent this symbolically. There is a scene in Attack of the Clones where Obi-Wan informs Yoda of a missing planet that was deleted from the Jedi archive. Notice the curtain in the background. It starts to raise, and then Obi-Wan speaks to Yoda. This could possibly be a reference to summoning Mephistopheles at dawn on a Wednesday morning.
But Master Yoda...
This sort of demon summoning imagery is present in a lot of occult literature. I found some drawings, paintings, and woodblock prints similar to the imagery present in Star Wars of 2 men or 1 man alone in a graveyard performing necromancy, raising spirits from the dead, or summoning a demon. In one image there's a man in a black robe who is wearing a mortarboard cap, indicating that he is a graduate whose mind has been formed by the system. Notice how the man in the lighter colored suit has his foot crossing the outer plane of the circle. It appears that Anakin is a work of demonic possession, where 2 witches bring him into a spellcasting circle and call him the Chosen One. He is then tested in order to enter the Jedi School of Mysteries. He then becomes a pupil whose mind has been molded by the Jedi Order. The reason why I say it's demonic possession is that demonic possession usually involves a person with psychological problems of a particular variety, such as schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder, hysteria, and other disorders of this variety. These conditions within a person can often be brought about after suffering a series of traumatic events. Anakin Skywalker suffered many traumatic events in his life, such as being born a slave and having his mother killed by raiders. When he went to the dark side, Darth Vader became his alter ego. Let's examine some of the names of the people involved. Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn is a play on the word qi or qigong, which is an ancient Chinese system involving meditation, breathing techniques, and other exercises in order to improve one's energy field, meaning life force. The Arabic jinn, meaning genie or tutelary spirit. On Wikipedia it says of jinn, witchcraft is often associated with jinn and afrit around the Middle East. Therefore, a sorcerer may summon a jinn and force him to perform orders. Summoned jinn may be sent to the chosen victim to cause demonic possession. Such summonings were done by invocation by aid of talisman by satisfying the jinn, thus to make the contract. Jinn are also regarded as assistants of soothsayers. Soothsayers reveal information from the past and present. The jinn can be a source of this information because their lifespans exceed those of humans. So Qui-Gon Jinn's name literally translates to Force Genie. At the end of Episode 1, Qui-Gon Jinn is killed. It is also interesting to note that Qui-Gon Jinn is the one who discovered how to reincarnate as a Force ghost and taught it to Yoda.
How are you here?
I am a manifestation of the Force. A force that consists of two parts. Living beings generate the living force, which in turn powers the wellspring that is the cosmic force.
Show yourself, can you?
I cannot. My training was incomplete. All energy from the living force, from all things that have ever lived, feeds into the cosmic force, binding everything and communicating to us through the midichlorians. Because of this, I can speak to you now.
See the future. You can.
I exist where there is no future or past.
Qui-Gon also shows Yoda the planet Dagobah, as well as the Cave of Darkness.
Be wary. Give power to that which you fear, and it will show itself to you.
When Yoda enters the Cave of Darkness, he has a vision in the cave of all the Jedi getting slaughtered in Order 66. The allegory of the cave, which is present in many works of fiction, is also present in Faust. For the philosopher Plato, the cave represents the confusion between what is authentic and what is fallacy. Exploration of the inner sanctum of the cave is also a journey within oneself to face one's deepest fears, facing inner turmoil through the revelation of what they may become. For Faust, he comes to the realization that he may ruin the woman he loves because of the pact he has with the devil. For Anakin Skywalker, it is him going over to the dark side and killing everyone he loves. For Luke Skywalker, it is the fear of him becoming his father. In The Last Jedi, he instead follows the path of Ben Kenobi by becoming a hermit and dying in a similar manner. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi means heart in African. Obi is a variant of the word obey, which refers to a form of African sorcery. So Obi paired with Wan means dark or unnaturally thin, the loss of or the diminishing. He is diminished in heart after he watches his master Qui-Gon Jinn die, leaves Anakin to die on Mustafar, sees Padme die, and is left in charge of his former Padawan's brother's only children, making him a man with a darkened heart or diminished heart, as love lost by definition is the diminishing of the heart. Ben means son in Hebrew. Obi-Wan preferred to be called this in the original trilogy by Luke, who ultimately went the same path as Obi-Wan. Initiates of the School of Mysteries think of themselves as the sons of God, and thus Christ-like figures in the flesh. Ken or Kene comes from German and means to know or be acquainted with. So, Kenobi or Kene Obi means to know heart. So, put it together, and Obi-Wan Kenobi loosely means the diminishing heart to know one's heart. When Obi-Wan is cut down by Darth Vader in A New Hope, it looks like a magic trick. Vader strikes him with his lightsaber, and Obi-Wan disappears, leaving behind nothing but his robe. It almost looks as though he went through a hidden panel in the floor. When I saw A New Hope as a child, I thought that Obi-Wan didn't die because he looks like he's up to something. He waits for Luke to see him, and then he pulls his lightsaber away, leaving him vulnerable like he's putting on a show. Did he know he was going to become a Force ghost? If he did, was it Yoda or Qui-Gon who taught him about it? There is an episode of the Clone Wars in which Jar Jar is confused for being a Jedi, and then he disappears underneath the floor, leaving behind nothing but his robe. It is also notable that Sith wear robes like this as well. Anakin Skywalker. Anakin seems to be a play on the word Anakim, which is a legend about people who were once giants. These giants are speculated to be the product of genetic experimentation. This deals with a field of science called epigenetics. This involves experimentation with people where those who are in charge of the experiment have some control over which genes are able to express themselves. It is a legend that people had figured out how to turn off the gene that inhibits growth. These people could never survive in the wild because they would never stop growing. The amount of food that they would need to sustain themselves would run out. There is an example of this in the modern day known as the liger, which is a lion and a tiger that are bred together. This creates a massive animal that is many times larger than both the lion or the tiger. This is because the genetic expression is stopped to inhibit growth. It would most likely starve in the wild due to the massive amount of food that the animal takes in. Perhaps Anakin is a metaphor for a person who has been experimented on. There is a statue in the Czech city known as Prague, designed by Ladislav Saloon, which is of a knight by the name of Jakým Burka, which bears a resemblance to Darth Vader. This statue is based on the legend of the Iron Knight. The same artist created a statue of Rabbi Lo, which the Golem myth is based on. Both statues were installed at the same time as well. Anakin Skywalker's story draws several parallels to the legend of the Iron Knight. As the legend goes, Burka left Prague to fight in a war, and upon returning home, heard that his fiancée had slept with another man. Enraged, Burka sought revenge by finding another woman and marrying her out of spite. The rumors turned out to be lies. She had faithfully awaited his return the whole time. She was heartbroken and drowned herself in the Vltava River. Her father, ashamed, threw himself from a high tower. When news of this reached Burka, he reacted in haste, just as he had when he first heard the rumors about his woman's infidelity. He shockingly strangled his new wife to death because he was in a rage. He then went on to hang himself. For his cruelty, the knight was turned to stone. His ghost was cursed to wander Planterneska Street, with freedom from his spectral fate coming only when he can convince a kindly maiden to sit and talk to him for an hour. He gets his chance at this once every 100 years. The Iron Knight is used as the Five of Cups in the Tarot of Prague deck. There are a great amount of parallels between the legend of the Iron Knight and the meaning of the Five Cups. The man in the black cloak on the Rider-White version of the card looks a bit like Anakin Skywalker, whose story also bears a connection to this particular card. 3 cups are spilled in front of him, representing his shortcomings and failures. He is grieving over his loss, which could be material, physical, or the loss of a loved one. Behind him are 2 cups, symbolic of the positive untapped potential to remedy the situation as well as opportunities that are still available to him. Because this loss is so fresh, it is difficult for the man in the black cloak to see this, but he must find the strength to overcome his losses or else he will be consumed by them. There is a bridge going over a river with a castle on the other side representing home, security, and stability in life. This card reminds us that we are all fallible and vulnerable to loss, and that the past cannot be changed. It also reminds us to understand and respect the things that are available to us and remain humble. Anakin, being a child from a broken home, had many issues with controlling his inner rage. He was taught by the Jedi to suppress his rage instead of restraining it. He was unable to control his passions, and thus became a person controlled by his desires. Darth Sidious was able to manipulate Anakin by appealing to his fear of loss. By forming a relationship with him for many years, he gained his trust and then offered protection for his loved ones. Sidious was able to tap into Anakin's desire for protection, which were forbidden by the Jedi. The Jedi had let his mother die on his home planet because of their belief in having zero outside attachments, and Anakin feared the same for Padme. Later on, he thought Padme had brought Obi-Wan to Mustafar to kill him, even though it wasn't true, and in his rage, grabbed her by the throat. He was supposed to strangle Padme to death in the original script, but she ends up dying during childbirth instead. The scene in a visual sense looks like a ritual killing. Obi-Wan was shouting at Anakin to let her go, and the last thing that Yoda told him was, "Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." It reads a bit like a subconscious hypnotic suggestion with the choice of words and all. In a strange way, he was just following Yoda's advice.
Let her go.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
The strangulation motif is prominent throughout the original trilogy as well. People have speculated that Darth is a play on the word Da'ath, the throat chakra on the Tree of Life. Da'ath is like staring into the abyss and understanding the depths of the tortured mind and human depravity. It's not hell, but it's a vision of hell and the things that are holding humanity back from reaching a more godly state of being. Understanding Darth Vader is like a window into the abyss and the dark mysteries that are behind the mask. In all scenes in the Jedi Council Room, Yoda is seated next to Mace Windu. In Secret Teachings of All Ages, it says of Mephisto, he is under the power of Jupiter, and his regent's name is Zadkiel, one of the throne angels of the Holy Jehovah. Mace Windu seems to represent Zadkiel the Archangel because of the fact that Windu carries a purple lightsaber, and Zadkiel is associated with the color violet and is in charge of the purple light ray on the spectrum of colors. There are typically 7 archangels that represent each color of the electromagnetic spectrum of light. Often referred to as an alchemist and cosmic magician, his name means righteousness of God. He is the chief angel of the Dominions, which is the 4th choir in the 2nd celestial hierarchy of Dionysus the Areopagite. In Jewish mysticism and Western ritual magic, Zadkiel is associated with the planet Jupiter, and this angel's position on the Sephiroth is 4th, which corresponds to mercy. The 2nd celestial hierarchy of Dionysus the Areopagite consists of 3 levels: dominions, principalities, and powers, which represent the government of the world. Dominions are a group of angels in Christianity who help keep the world in proper order. Dominion angels are known for delivering God's justice into situations that are unjust, showing mercy towards people, and helping angels in lower ranks stay organized and perform their duties correctly. The ones in this painting have purple wings in the back row. Notice how they all carry weapons and large objects. This is because they are the enforcers. They are the ones who keep order. The Bible describes a famous example of that in the story of how Dominion angels destroy Sodom and Gomorrah after these 2 cities fell into sin and debauchery. Zadkiel is the protector of the children of sinful parents. He makes sure that the children do not follow their parents' paths. It is interesting to note that an angel appears in Faust, and he is listed in the credits as Erzangel, which is Archangel in English. This angel holds many of the same qualities as Zadkiel. Mephisto had made him aware of Dr. Faust's activities, that he was trying to turn base metals into gold. Upon hearing this information, Erzangel backed off and allowed Mephisto to tempt him. When Mace Windu confronts Palpatine and accuses him of being a Sith Lord, he was willing to use lethal force in order to stop him. Anakin Skywalker cut off Windu's hand when he was going to kill Sidious and his offices. This was because Sidious had manipulated Anakin's weakened ego, who then used this opportunity to kill Mace Windu. This was symbolic of dark forces breaking through the gates of heaven by using manipulative tricks in order to do it. When Anakin falls to the dark side, his charred and burnt body is recovered by Darth Sidious. Anakin becomes the subject of experiments in which his body is outfitted with numerous scientific enhancements and augmentations, as most of his limbs were cut off in the battle with Obi-Wan Kenobi. There is a parallel to Faust here when Anakin is recovered by Sidious, because after he has destroyed the woman he loved and nearly dies himself, Sidious is there to collect the contract. His body is brought to a hellish environment, and he became like a tortured soul trapped inside of his own body. In the 1926 version of Faust, Dr. Faust dies in a fire with the woman he ruined. They are able to have their souls forgiven, though, because the Archangel argued Liebe, meaning love in German, which is an interesting choice of words. What he seems to infer is that they truly loved each other, thus voiding the contract that Dr. Faust signed with Mephisto. In other pre-Goethe versions of the play, Dr. Faust did indeed have his soul carried off to hell. Darth Vader's story draws a lot of parallels to other stories and myths in popular culture, such as the Golem, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and the Manchurian Candidate. The Golem is probably the most important parallel to be drawn here. Darth Sidious plays the role of the rabbi, mad scientist, magician, or witch bringing his experiment to life. Much like how the Golem is activated by the magic word, Darth Sidious activates Darth Vader by uttering the magic words that would tap into his uncontrollable rage and desires. The image of Vader bursting out of the machine that was holding him in place after the operation emphasizes this point.
What is thy bidding, my master?
There is a great disturbance in the Force.
The most well-known version of the Golem myth involves a late 16th century rabbi named Judea Lo ben Bezalel, otherwise known as Rabbi Lo, which is based on a real person, and as I mentioned earlier, there is a statue of him in the city of Prague. It's not the first Golem tale, as there are others in the Talmud or the Book of Genesis, such as the story of the creation of Adam. As the story goes, Emperor Rudolf II was trying to evict all of Prague's Jews. Rabbi Lo, one of the community leaders in the Jewish quarter, in turn created a defender, the Golem. The Golem story came about because of his mythical status of understanding alchemy, occult magic, Kabbalah, and the dark arts. The Golem is an animated anthropomorphic being that is magically created entirely from inanimate matter, usually clay or mud. There are many tales differing on how the Golem was brought to life and afterward controlled. Oftentimes it was Hebrew activation letters which was used to activate or deactivate the Golem. These letters were either inscribed on the forehead or written on a piece of paper and put into his mouth or put inside of a pendant like in the film Der Golem. The idea of building a mechanical man who is a mindless servant is said to be a crude perversion of God's powers of creation. In the classical narrative, Rabbi Lo deactivated the Golem on Friday evenings by removing the Shem before the Sabbath began, so as to let it rest on the Sabbath. Rabbi Lo would have to shut down the Golem every Saturday because the Golem would go into a rage if it wasn't deactivated. In some versions of the myth, Rabbi Lo forgets to shut down the Golem on a Friday night, and the Golem goes on a rampage and desecrates the Sabbath. In others, such as the film in 1920, it is activated by his assistant on the Sabbath. The Golem is also said to be the basis of the modern superhero. In 1974, the Golem was featured in a Marvel comic book where the Golem, the thing that walks like a man, was featured as the great defender who draws his strength from the truth, and has the Hebrew letters for truth imprinted on his forehead. The Strange Tales of Golem only ran 3 issues. Writer Len Wein explains, "In centuries agone, they had called him a myth, a creature formed of stone and clay and the blood of a people's oppression, a moving monolith who rose before the yoke of tyranny, shattered in it his monumental fists, then vanished into the sands of time, there to be almost forgotten, until today. Now once more he rises, summoned from his eons-long sleep to protect those he loves." Prague is connected to the Golem as Metropolis is connected to Superman. Benjamin Krauss, author of As Golems Go, explains why the Golem still adventures in the Czech Republic. After living through the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Nazism, and a decade of communism, the Czechs are drawn to a character with supernatural powers that will help liberate them from oppression. The Golem is also the original robot, a Czech word for laborer or slave. Karl Čapek revealed them to the world in his play R.U.R., Rozum's Universal Robots, resulting in the extinction of the human race in 1920. There is nothing more uncanny than something that is almost human, says writer Margaret Atwood. All of our stories about robotics are stories like that. It's what we have always worried about. It's the sorcerer's apprentice story. He learns how to do the charm, he doesn't know how to turn it off. It's the Golem story. You make the Golem, you activate it, it's supposed to do your work for you, and then it runs amok. It seems that Darth Vader's legend is based on a blend of both the Golem and the Iron Knight. He is half-machine, half-human cyborg who swears to a master. His rage had turned him from being a Jedi Knight and into a Golem. His master, Darth Sidious, controlled him through rage. In Star Wars, Darth Vader's suit has very small, cryptic Hebrew lettering. There has been a lot of speculation as to what the Hebrew lettering actually means, but I think the best explanation is that this is a reference to the Golem. This reference to the Golem story in Star Wars makes sense considering that Anakin is the chosen one. Hebrew is written from right to left. The first line has 5 letters in 2 words, apparently meaningless unless, with a bit of stretching, it can be read as Father-Saturday. The second line is the interesting one. Written upside down, it is more like a label than a part of a sentence, and the letters are GLMTSITS. 2 words, Golem and Sits. Hebrew avoids writing vowels, hence GLM is pronounced Golem. The third may be read as till his cast down. The Hebrew word sits is the name of the golden plate on the head of the Jewish high priest as part of his official, very specific garments. The breastplate above Darth Vader's suit may be a control panel similar to the Golem's activation letters. The red buttons above each line of the Hebrew lettering looks like coin slots on an arcade machine, reinforcing the activation motif. The chest plate itself looks very similar to the design of the High Priest's breastplate with its iconic red and blue buttons. In Return of the Jedi, Ben Kenobi appears to Luke as a Force ghost. Luke asks him why he told him that Darth Vader betrayed and murdered his father. Obi-Wan replies,
"Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view."
A certain point of view?
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Obi-Wan basically regarded Darth Vader as a Golem.
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
Star Wars depicts a world where witchcraft and sorcery rules the day. With the story of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, you see an attempt to create a demigod. The merging of man-made technology with a human being results in the creation of a false idol, the chosen one who will bring balance to the Force. Many of the technological enhancements made in the Star Wars universe appear to provide a sense of freedom, but result in the cutting off of free will instead. Darth Sidious had designed Vader's suit in such a way that it would greatly enhance his abilities in some ways, but hindered them in others, so as to keep him under control. This seems to be what both the Jedi and the Sith are interested in doing, is having control over the Force, which translates to all living beings in their quest for immortality. Essentially, this is the theme of turning base metals into gold, and the goal of the alchemist is to destroy duality in order to bring about the Golden Age. Man must destroy himself in order to achieve this alchemical transformation. Man's natural state of existence is his greatest barrier in order to achieve the golden light of the new age and be reborn. That is, to transcend human limitation and become completely post-human. These are the themes that underpin not only the Star Wars universe, but Faust and the Golem as well. It is the allegory of the alchemist and the mystery schools. So think about this the next time you watch Star Wars and they talk about using the Force. This is the work of alchemy, sorcery, witchcraft, and occult magic.